May 24th, 1883. Dawn reaches New York from the harbor, and the city appears almost unrecognizable. No Statue of Liberty watches the ships. No Empire State Building breaks the clouds. Times Square is still Longacre Square. The subway does not exist, and the streets below are ruled by hooves, iron wheels, steam, and human muscle. Masts crowd the waterfront. Coal smoke drifts across church spires and factory chimneys. Above the East River, two granite towers rise higher than anything around them, joined by a web of steel so vast that many citizens struggle to trust what they see. Before nightfall, the longest suspension bridge on Earth will open between two rival cities. New York has not yet built its famous skyline. Today, it begins building the metropolis that will demand one. The harbor wakes first. Steamships approach beneath long banners of smoke. Ferries shoulder through the tidal current. Tugboats strain against barges loaded with coal, grain, timber, stone, cotton, machinery, and food. Wooden masts stand beside iron funnels. Sail and steam forced into the same crowded frame. The waterfront is the furnace at the city's center. Farms, mines, canals, factories, and railroads all converge here with the Atlantic world. New York is already the largest city in the United States and one of its great manufacturing powers. It finances the modern age, assembles it in workshops and warehouses, then sends it back across the ocean. Near the Battery, passengers step ashore at Castle Garden, the circular former fort now serving as America's first official immigrant processing center, operated by New York State. Ellis Island will not begin receiving immigrants until 1892. In 1883, this is the gateway. Records are checked at the registry desk. The exchange office changes foreign currency. Railroad agents sell onward tickets, while staff direct travelers towards relatives, boarding houses, or trains leading far beyond the city. By the time the depot closes in 1890, more than 8 million immigrants will have passed through this building. Their first American landscape is a compressed world of baggage carts, porters, boarding house agents, sailors, officials, anxious families, and strangers calling names into the noise. A child is lifted above the crowd to search for a familiar face. A porter drags a trunk towards a waiting wagon. Somewhere nearby, a family studies a handwritten address, as though it were a map to an entire future. They have arrived in the nation's greatest city, but there is no ceremonial avenue waiting for them. Their welcome is practical, loud, and uncertain. Behind the clerks and ticket counters, New York is already asking its first question. Where can each new arrival fit inside a city that seems to have no empty space? Out in the harbor, another absence would startle a modern visitor. Bedloe's Island is still dominated by the star-shaped walls of Fort Wood. The colossal copper statue that will transform the entrance to New York has not yet arrived. Foundation work is beginning on the island, while the campaign to finance the pedestal remains incomplete. 3 years from now, the Statue of Liberty will be dedicated. Later, in 1883, Emma Lazarus will write a sonnet for a fundraising exhibition, and its words will eventually help recast the statue as a symbol of refuge and arrival. This morning, no raised torch greets the ships. The monument confronting newcomers is the city itself, unfinished, unforgiving, and alive. Further north, preparations are already spreading around City Hall and Park Row. Flags are being fixed to windows. Officials are reviewing schedules. Workers clear the approaches to the new bridge. On both shores, people are deciding where they might stand when the crossing finally opens. The morning begins like any other working day in New York, but the metropolis is slowly turning towards the river, and the city is already enormous. The 1880 census counted 1,206,299 people in New York City. Across the East River, Brooklyn held 566,663 residents, making it the third largest city in the nation. Brooklyn is a separate municipality with its own mayor, government, police, newspapers, industries, institutions, and fierce civic identity. Many Brooklynites call Manhattan simply New York, almost as if it were a neighboring country. The two cities trade with one another, employ one another, compete with one another, and depend on one another every hour of the day. Yet every ordinary journey between them must still submit to the water. The East River is a tidal strait, narrow, fast-moving, unpredictable, and crowded with commercial traffic. Ferries carry clerks, laborers, horses, wagons, produce, parcels, and entire currents of urban life between the shores. In clear weather, the crossing can feel routine. Fog, ice, storms, or heavy traffic make the distance real again. One delayed ferry may mean a missed train, spoiled goods, a reduced day's wage, or an appointment abandoned on the opposite bank. New York and Brooklyn already function like parts of the same organism. The water keeps forcing them to breathe at different rhythms. From the Battery, Lower Manhattan rises like a machine built from brick, stone, timber, iron, animals, and human bodies. Delivery wagons block loading doors. Horse-drawn omnibuses fight for space with streetcars, private carriages, freight drays, handcarts, pedestrians, and livestock moving towards markets. Iron-rimmed wheels strike uneven paving stones. Hooves slip, catch, and drive forward. Bells cut across shouted warnings. Steam whistles answer from the harbor. Over several avenues, elevated trains hammer along iron frameworks, shaking windows and dropping soot and cinders into the darkened streets below. A train enters an intersection before the wagons beneath it have cleared. Its locomotive exhales black smoke between second-story windows. For a moment, the street exists on two levels: wheels and hooves below, steel and steam above. Residents gain speed and lose sunlight. Shopkeepers gain passing crowds and lose silence. New York has found its newest instinct. When movement fails at ground level, build another layer of city over it. The solution is fast, but never gentle. Ash drifts onto coats and awnings. The iron structure throws long shadows over storefronts. Conversations pause when the train passes, then resume as the last carriage disappears up the avenue. Congestion is relieved by creating smoke, vibration, noise, and new corridors of darkness. It is a pattern New York will repeat for generations. Every answer to scale creates another problem. Yet the true engine of daily life still breathes, sweats, and eats. Horses pull freight, passengers, streetcars, fire engines, food, stone, timber, and nearly every object too heavy for human hands. Stables, blacksmith shops, feed stores, carriage houses, and water troughs are essential infrastructure. Each animal must be fed, rested, housed, cleaned, and shod. A broken harness can stop a delivery. A lame horse can delay a business. Thousands of journeys depend on muscle and endurance. This is a brutally fast city, powered by living bodies. The streets smell of hay, leather, coal smoke, food, mud, and waste. Drivers lean forward over the reins, searching for a gap that lasts only seconds. Pedestrians step between wheels with practiced precision. Nothing waits politely. The city has already outgrown its streets, yet every morning it forces another day's commerce through them. Then the bridge enters the view, and every familiar proportion collapses. Its Manhattan approach rises near City Hall and Park Row towards a vast Gothic arch cut through a granite tower. Beyond it, the roadway appears to float over the East River, held by vertical suspenders, diagonal stays, and four enormous main cables. The central span measures 1,595 feet and 6 inches, longer than any suspension span previously completed. The granite towers rise roughly 276 feet. At its opening, this is the longest suspension bridge in the world, and its towers stand among the tallest structures in the Western Hemisphere. With the approaches, the crossing extends more than a mile. It climbs out of one city, passes through open sky, and descends into another. More than 13 years have passed since construction began, and the man who first imagined the crossing is not here to see it. John Augustus Roebling, the bridge's original designer, was surveying the waterfront in 1869 when a ferry crushed his foot against a piling. He died weeks later after developing tetanus. The design, the political pressure, and the danger passed to his son, Washington Roebling, a Civil War veteran and experienced engineer who inherited more than a project. He inherited a promise made to two cities. The first great battle was fought beneath the river. Workers descended into enormous pneumatic caissons, sealed timber chambers sunk below the water and filled with compressed air. Inside, under dim artificial light, they excavated mud, sand, clay and rock so the towers could rest on stable foundations. The pressure kept water from flooding the chambers. It also introduced a danger few understood. A worker leaving the caisson might feel normal at first. Then pain could strike his joints. Weakness might spread through his body. Paralysis could follow. The men called it caisson disease. Today it is known as decompression sickness, caused when pressure changes allow gas bubbles to form in the body. Some recovered. Others carried permanent damage. Washington Roebling spent long periods below the river and became seriously ill. His health never fully returned. He remained chief engineer, but the bridge could no longer be directed in the ordinary way.
From his home in Brooklyn Heights, Washington studied reports, reviewed calculations, issued instructions, and followed the work through trusted assistants. The essential link between his sick room and the construction site was Emily Warren Roebling. She learned the mathematics, materials, cable methods, and engineering language needed to carry complex decisions between her husband, contractors, trustees, officials, and the men on the bridge. The exact boundaries of Emily's formal authority were never clearly recorded. Her importance was. She became indispensable to the bridge's completion and to the defense of Washington's position when critics tried to remove him. In a century that rarely credited women's technical work on equal terms, Emily mastered the calculations, materials, and administrative language of the bridge until her role became impossible to dismiss. The bridge is often remembered as the achievement of 3 Roeblings. Even that version leaves most of its builders outside the frame. Thousands of workers quarried and set stone, raised the towers, operated machinery, spun the cables, and labored above, below, and beside the river. They included immigrants and native-born workers from different ethnic and racial backgrounds, most earning modest wages for dangerous work. Historical sources do not agree on the precise number who died during construction. New York City archival accounts commonly estimate approximately 27. Many more suffered injury or lasting illness. Their labor remains inside every stone course, wire, anchorage, and buried foundation. By late morning, the approaches are growing crowded. Flags hang from buildings near the bridge. Boats begin taking positions on the river. Rooftops fill slowly. Then all at once, the city's ordinary machinery continues to move, but more faces are turning toward the towers. Only a few blocks from the Manhattan approach, Park Row is turning information into another form of traffic. Newspaper offices receive reports by telegraph and messenger, compress events into columns of type, and release them back into the city through newsboys. Railway stations, ferries, hotels, saloons, and financial houses. Shipping reports, election results, prices, crimes, inventions, scandals, and rumors can cross New York faster than the people inside the story. Metal type is locked into place. Presses begin to turn. A newsboy runs into the street with sheets still smelling of ink. Soon people who cannot see the bridge know which officials have arrived, how large the crowds are growing, and what the newspapers believe the day should mean. New York is being connected by rails, roads, and cables, and by the attention of 2 cities turning toward the same event. The telegraph is also changing the city's relationship with time. Railroads and financial markets cannot operate comfortably if every town keeps noon according to its own local sun. On November 18, 1883, North American railroads will adopt standardized time zones. In New York, railway time will differ from local solar time by only a few minutes, but the principle is revolutionary. The connected city is no longer satisfied with shared streets and shared news. It wants shared minutes. Beneath those streets, another revolution has already begun. On September 4, 1882, less than 9 months before the bridge opens, Thomas Edison's Pearl Street station began supplying direct current electricity to a small district of Lower Manhattan. On its first day, the system powered roughly 400 lamps for 85 customers. Most New Yorkers still depend on gas, oil, candles, and daylight.
Electric illumination is rare, expensive, and geographically limited. Yet a threshold is being crossed. Electricity is no longer confined to a laboratory demonstration. A central station sends power through underground conductors into offices and buildings. Above ground, horses struggle through traffic, and gas lamps wait for evening. Below them, copper conductors are carrying the first pulse of the electrical city. Wall Street is powerful, but it has not yet formed the stone canyon of the 20th century. Banks, exchanges, insurance companies, telegraph offices, and counting houses occupy buildings that are beginning to rise as elevators make upper floors practical. The 10-story Mills building, completed in 1882, offers a glimpse of what concentrated business space might one day look like. Church spires and the bridge towers dominate the horizon. Height is not yet New York's visual identity. It is an experiment taking place in foundations, shafts, iron columns, elevators, and ledges. Manhattan land is expensive. Corporations want more offices on less ground. Elevators are turning upper floors from punishment into profit. Builders are testing iron framing, fire resistance, foundations, wind loads, and new structural systems, sometimes faster than regulation can understand them.
The skyline remains low because the machinery of vertical construction is being assembled. Every economic force destined to push New York upward is already pressing against the roof. From Wall Street, another whistle rolls in from the East River. The opening hour is drawing closer, and from Lower Manhattan, every crowded street now seems to lead toward the towers. Moving north from the financial district, the city changes almost from doorway to doorway. A wagon stops behind a building whose ground floor sells finished clothing. Bolts of fabric are carried through a narrow entrance and lifted toward upper rooms. On one floor, workers cut cloth at long tables. On another, a family sews beside the beds where they will sleep that night. Finished garments return downstairs, enter a cart, and disappear toward a shop. The same building is factory, warehouse, home, and workplace. This pattern repeats through thousands of spaces. Furniture, cigars, metal goods, printed material, food, tools, and luxury products are made in factories, rear buildings, cellars, upper floors, and tenement rooms. New York's manufacturing power is scattered through the urban fabric rather than contained in a few giant plants. Work follows people indoors. Production continues even after the street disappears behind a closed door. In districts later grouped under the name Lower East Side, the sound of the street changes block by block. German is among the most common languages. Klein Deutschland, Little Germany, contains churches, schools, theaters, clubs, newspapers, shops, beer gardens, and mutual aid societies. Irish communities are deeply established. Arrivals from Italy and Eastern Europe are beginning to reshape older immigrant neighborhoods, though the largest migrations are still ahead. African American New Yorkers live and work in several districts, repeatedly pushed by discrimination, redevelopment, and rising rents. Near the Bowery, Chinatown is the center of a small but growing community, composed mostly of men, with businesses and associations serving Chinese residents throughout New York. A bakery preserves the taste of a village left across the ocean. A church basement organizes relief after sickness. A saloon functions as employment exchange, political club, and neighborhood newsroom. A shop sign announces a language community before a visitor hears a single word. These streets contain poverty, crowding, ambition, memory, and advertisement in the same rooms. Much of the culture later celebrated as unmistakably New York is being assembled here, in neighborhoods wealthy observers often describe only as foreign or dangerous. The variety is real. Equality is not. The Chinese Exclusion Act, signed into federal law in 1882, has sharply restricted the immigration of Chinese laborers. Prejudice determines who may enter, where a person can live, what work is available, and whether the law offers meaningful protection. New York depends on newcomers, while political movements repeatedly portray them as a threat. The contradiction stands in plain view at the nation's gateway. Housing makes the cost of growth impossible to ignore. In a narrow tenement room, daylight may arrive only as a grey reflection from an air shaft. Voices travel between apartments. Cooking smoke drifts upward. A child hears another family through a wall thin enough to carry every argument
and every lullaby. Privacy is measured in inches. The Tenement House Act of 1879 requires new rooms to open toward a street, yard, or airshaft. The rule encourages the narrow-waisted plan, later known as the dumbbell tenement. Reformers hope these shafts will bring light and ventilation into interior rooms. Many are too narrow to work effectively, especially on lower floors. They collect noise, smoke, refuse, and heat. During a fire, some can channel smoke and flame through the building. The law represents a serious attempt at reform, but legislation cannot rebuild New York overnight. Elder structures remain crowded, enforcement is uneven, and population growth outruns safer housing. Yet hardship does not explain these neighborhoods by itself. Families share childcare. Mutual aid societies collect money for sickness and funerals. Apprentices learn trades from relatives and neighbors. Credit moves through personal trust when banks are distant or inaccessible. Food, music, worship, politics, and language create forms of protection the wider city often fails to provide. Survival here is organized socially, one doorway and one promise at a time. As afternoon approaches, ships along the East River dress themselves with flags. Steam whistles answer one another across the water. The bridge approaches are now packed, and the crowd continues to thicken. Yet only a few streets away, commerce refuses to pause. New York celebrates with one hand and keeps working with the other. Further uptown, New York changes costume again.
Union Square and Madison Square are centers of hotels, entertainment, commerce, protest, and public display. Broadway's Great Theater District still lies farther south. Longacre Square remains a district of carriage makers, harness shops, and stables. The fashionable city lies much farther south than it will a generation later. Theaters, restaurants, shops, hotels, and wealthy households are moving north. Behind them, older buildings are adapted by the next population arriving from below. A fashionable house turns into a boarding house. A private parlor opens as a shop. A neighborhood rarely disappears all at once. It changes tenants, signs, smells, and purposes until the same walls belong to a different New York. On Fifth Avenue, prosperity becomes performance. Carriages stop before brownstone and marble residences. Servants move through rooms filled with imported furniture, paintings, silver, textiles, and objects selected for display as much as comfort. Fortunes built through railroads, finance, shipping, manufacturing, and real estate harden into architecture. Dinner tables serve as stages for alliances. Parlors function as instruments of reputation. Only a few blocks away, several families may share limited facilities in a crowded tenement. The distance between these worlds can be crossed in minutes. It can also seem impossible to cross in a lifetime. Central Park breaks the grid with a landscape carefully engineered to feel natural. By 1883, its lakes, bridges, drives, meadows, paths, the mall, Bethesda Terrace, and formal gathering spaces are established parts of city life. The park offers relief from paving stones, smoke, hooves, wheels, and walls. It also serves as a vast social theater. Wealthy families display their carriages along the drives. Workers walk on their day off. Children gather near lawns and fountains. Vendors, musicians, tourists, immigrants, and long-time residents share a constructed countryside inside the expanding metropolis. Even escape from the city has been designed by the city. Beyond the most densely built districts, Manhattan grows less continuous. Elevated railways encourage development towards Harlem. Row houses, flats, and apartment buildings spread through the Upper East and Upper West sides. Yet open lots, exposed rock, small houses, scattered institutions, market gardens, and semi-rural spaces survive inside areas a modern viewer imagines as fully urban. The rectangular grid may exist on paper long before every block is filled. Downtown, families crowd into rooms with too little air. Uptown, projected avenues still run beside rock and open ground. New York is overcrowded and unfinished at the same moment. Across the East River, Brooklyn moves to a different rhythm. Fulton Ferry is packed with travelers threading through streets of shops, warehouses, taverns, transport yards, boarding houses, and newspaper offices. Above the waterfront, Brooklyn Heights offers rows of brick and brownstone homes with commanding views of Manhattan. Farther inland, residential neighborhoods expand around churches, commercial streets,
and local institutions. Prospect Park gives Brooklyn its own great designed landscape. Along the waterfront and around Wallabout Bay, shipyards, refineries, factories, warehouses, and docks form an industrial belt essential to both cities. Brooklyn is a major urban power facing another across the water. Its independence shapes the meaning of the bridge. Many residents have no desire to end up as a secondary district of New York. The new crossing, therefore, carries a political contradiction inside its cables. It proves Brooklyn's scale and importance while making future consolidation easier to imagine. It protects Brooklyn's claim to greatness and weakens the physical separation on which that independence depends. The bridge joins two cities without answering the question that follows every crossing. When connection becomes permanent, which identity survives unchanged? In 1898, Greater New York will unite Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island beneath one municipal government. That outcome is still 15 years away. On this day, the mayors approaching the bridge represent separate cities, separate electorates, and separate ambitions. The opening hour arrives. Flags and bunting spill from buildings. Ships crowd the harbor and the East River. Spectators gather on rooftops, piers, windowsills, approaches, and every elevated point with a view. Officials, military units, journalists, engineers, and invited guests move towards the towers. President Chester A. Arthur attends, marking the bridge as a national achievement rather than a local convenience. New York Mayor Franklin Edson and Brooklyn Mayor Seth Low stand for two governments about to meet over the water. Cannon fire rolls across the river. Church bells answer. Steam whistles erupt from ships and factories. Cheers move from one shore to the other, delayed by distance, then return with greater force. For a few minutes, the entire industrial metropolis sounds like one vast instrument. Emily Roebling is publicly associated with the first ceremonial passage across the completed bridge, and later accounts often remember her as the first person to cross it in a carriage. She carries a rooster, a traditional symbol of victory. Washington Roebling, too ill to join the public ceremonies, receives officials at the family home in Brooklyn Heights. Outside, the city celebrates a structure designed to conquer distance. Inside, its chief engineer remains confined by illness. The triumph is visible in granite and steel. Much of its cost remains in caissons, ledgers, sick rooms, workshops, and memory. The deck has been divided for several forms of movement. Carriageways occupy the outer sections. Rail tracks are built into the crossing. Above them, a central elevated promenade gives pedestrians a protected path and a view unlike anything else in New York. Yet the trains many modern viewers imagine do not run on opening day. Passenger service on the Bridge Cable Railway will begin on September 25, 1883, after further preparation and testing. On May 24th, the public encounter is defined by footsteps, wheels, and horse-drawn traffic. For someone climbing the promenade, the city rearranges itself with every step. At street level, New York is a sequence of walls, awnings, wagons, smoke, shadows, elevated tracks, and abrupt corners. From above, those fragments lock together. The harbor opens to the south. Industrial shores extend northward. Ferries cross beneath the deck. Manhattan compresses into rooftops, steeples, chimneys, cupolas, and telegraph lines. Brooklyn spreads inland across Long Island. Ordinary citizens are suddenly standing at a height previously available mainly from church towers, rooftops, ship masts, or balloons. A clerk, a laborer, a child, and a visiting dignitary can look down upon the same river from the same path. Before the bridge transforms commuting, it transforms the imagination of distance. When the wider public is admitted, many people do not hurry across. They stop between the towers. They watch steam vessels pass far below. Some touch the stone. Others listen to the unfamiliar vibration of wind and footsteps moving through the structure. The bridge does not feel still. It breathes under weight. To cross is to accept an invisible argument. Thousands of parallel wires must share tension. Weight must travel through suspenders, cables, towers, and anchorages. Foundations must endure beneath the riverbed, where no pedestrian can see them. The bridge asks ordinary people to trust forces they cannot observe and calculations made by engineers they will never meet. Transportation is only part of the experience. The crossing offers a public lesson in invisible strength. That trust will soon prove fragile. 6 days after the opening, on May 30th, a sudden panic on the pedestrian approach will kill 12 people and seriously injure many others. The bridge itself will remain sound. Fear inside a dense crowd will move faster than evidence, and the human system on the structure will turn dangerous before order can be restored. Engineering can make a bridge secure. It cannot automatically make a crowd safe. The following year, P.T. Barnum will lead a procession including 21 elephants across the span. Reassurance becomes spectacle. The performance is theatrical, absurd, and unmistakable. The bridge can carry more than rumor believes. On opening night, none of that has happened yet. Fireworks rise around the towers. Illuminations trace the cables against the dark water. Crowds watch from ships, streets, windows, rooftops, piers, and both shores. Bursts of color vanish into smoke, drifting across the river. The granite arches appear, disappear, then return behind the haze. Before skyscrapers define Manhattan, New York possesses another kind of skyline. One brilliant horizontal line suspended over black water. Below it, the ferries keep moving. The bridge does not erase the old city in a single day. Horses continue pulling freight and passengers. Gaslight illuminates most rooms. Castle Garden continues receiving immigrants. Masonry walls still determine how high most buildings can rise. New York and Brooklyn remain politically separate. The future enters as a new layer laid over the existing metropolis. Sail and steam share the harbor. Gas flames and electric bulbs share the night. Ferries pass beneath the span that will weaken their dominance. Horse-drawn streetcars move below elevated steam trains. Low brick blocks surround the first tall office buildings. Modernity arrives through overlap, friction, and contradiction, rather than through a clean replacement of one age by another. The crossing changes far more than the time required to reach the opposite shore.
A clerk in Brooklyn can now imagine reaching a Manhattan office without watching the weather or waiting for a ferry. A merchant can picture goods moving on a more predictable schedule. A family can consider living farther from a workplace. Daily routes shift. Brooklyn land grows more attractive to commuters and developers. Rents, labor markets, and political arguments begin moving with the new traffic. In the decades ahead, more bridges, tunnels, transit lines, docks, water systems, and railways follow. Steel-framed towers rise over Lower Manhattan. 3 years later, the Statue of Liberty takes her place in the harbor. Electric traction replaces many horse-powered lines. By 1904, the first subway line opens. New York grows upward, outward, underground, and across the water, following the logic made visible here. But from the promenade tonight, none of those outcomes can be seen clearly. The future exists as pressure, ambition, and possibility. Below lies the harbor that made New York rich. Behind the towers stand two independent cities, shaped by invention and inequality, prejudice and cooperation, exhaustion and desire. The bridge can join streets, labor markets, neighborhoods, and daily journeys. It cannot decide how power is shared, whose property gains value, whose rent rises, or which communities are displaced by the metropolis it helps create. Connection is an engineering achievement. Unity is a different problem. The last fireworks fade. Smoke drifts over the water, thins and disappears into the darkness. Gas lamps burn in thousands of windows. In a small district of Lower Manhattan, electric bulbs glow with a steady, almost unnatural pallor. Ferries continue crossing beneath the span, their lights moving on the current like embers. On the promenade, the final visitors turn back toward a city without the skyline that will one day make it recognizable from anywhere on Earth. They are looking at something more unsettling than an old New York waiting to vanish. They are watching the metropolis discover how to build above itself, beneath itself, through itself, and across the water. Those twin towers are only the first unmistakable outline of that future. The streets, ferry landings, workshops, tenement rooms, mansions, caissons,
and electric wires all belong to the same transformation. Countless separate movements are beginning, little by little, to merge into one metropolis. Below, a ferry wake opens across the Black River and disappears.
Above it, the bridge remains. New York has found a way across the water. The question now, suspended between the towers, is what the city of the future will demand from everyone who must learn to live inside it.